You're listening to Alcoholics Alive, where recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous share their experience on how they live AA as a way of life. None of our participants get paid or speak for AA. Here are your hosts, Shank and Wayne. Hey, we are here for episode 13 of season 7. I think that's right. This is going to be our last episode. We're going to, I don't know what the topic is. Shank will tell us in a minute. Now, Shank, we had some good guests this year, or this season, excuse me. One of the ones that we got some good shrapnel, and we actually got some good tips from our guest.
We did.
If you're a guest and you're listening, we do appreciate you coming on and spending your time with us. One from Dawn sticks out. Catchphrase. You can't use catchphrases to solve alcoholism.
Yep.
Yep. I really thought that was a good one.
Maggie had a good one.
What was
which
that?
Was the only opinion that matters is the doctor's opinion.
I had never heard that before. I loved it.
That was a pretty good one.
I'm going to start using that on all newcomers. Hey, your opinion, or even old timers, right? Hey, your opinion really doesn't matter. The only opinion that counts here is the doctor's opinion.
It's not Jerry's opinion. It's the doctor's opinion.
That's right. How about Janice said that she tried to fix, manage, and control her drinking.
I like that one too. Fix,
Didn't
manage,
work.
Control. She said it so fast that I almost couldn't catch it.
Yep. Yeah, that won't work.
Well, episode 4, Tom, he said he's a big book advocate, not a big book thumper.
That's right. I guess that's a little easier, softer, right, on people.
It does sound that way, yes.
I'm not a thumper. I'm an advocate. I like that, though.
I do.
Wonder if he'll be a PLBB advocate once it comes out.
Well, maybe.
Maybe. Who said King Baby?
Dan.
That was Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The King Baby.
Man, I've been there. Yep, I have certainly been there. And then Otis said something about the 2020 rule.
He did.
What was that?
Well, you have to get there 20 minutes before and 20 minutes after.
Oh, you got to get to the meeting 20 minutes before and 20 minutes after.
That's the 2020 rule.
Not a bad suggestion. What about old Trey? He said he was living in the woods like a possum.
That was good.
That was a good one. It sure was. That was a good one. We also had on one of the episodes we covered the one of the mottos, first things first. I guess we covered all 3 of those mottos.
Yep.
And we had a question about first things first and where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
We did get an email from one of the listeners, Brian, who referred us to Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers and said that, I don't know, I'm trying to find that here. Oh, yeah. It says, if you go back to Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, first things first meant seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And that came from the Holy Bible, Matthew 6:3. I confirmed that, so that is accurate. It says that in there. And they are saying the most important thing should always be seeking God and his will through prayer and meditation. So, Brian, thanks for sending that. We'll go with it.
This sounds right to me.
It sounds right to me. And then somebody anonymously, right at the beginning of the season, after we did that special episode on the Grapevine,
Mm-hmm.
and a little before that, we did an episode on the PLBB,
Mm-hmm.
and we made, or let me back up. I made the comment, I don't want to blame it on Shank, it was my doing, that maybe we should elect some better delegates and trusted servants. It was not a slam on people. I appreciate one that serves at the general service office and in the general service structure. I know it's a thankless job. I was just referring to we needed to make maybe some better decisions financially. Well, after those two episodes, we got an anonymous email with applications to the non-trustee board of director position, and I think the other one was for the trustee at large. So just for full transparency, I applied for the non-trustee AA director position, and I got some very nice emails back from the office that I was not selected. So
Denied.
I was denied. However, according to their job description, I was very qualified for the position. So just let that be known. Anyway, so we're trying. I mean, we're not like hiding or thinking that we got all the answers. So I did apply. I was encouraged to apply for future positions,
Hmm.
which I will do. So thanks for reviewing. Thanks for anonymously sending that. Since I've been transparent with you, maybe you can reply back and tell us who you are. That's for the person who sent the email. I think I know who you are, but I guess more will be revealed,
That's right.
as they say. Shank, what's our topic today?
Well, today I thought that we would talk about Dr. Bob's nightmare. It's only fair we talk about Bill.
Yeah.
His story is in the first 164. Dr. Bob's is not.
Does that make sense?
I don't know if it makes sense or does not make sense.
Hmm.
Never really given it too much thought. I've never really given, when people say the first 164, too much thought.
Right.
That's fine. I like a lot of the stories. When I got sober, I read the stories over and over and over. I didn't have access to AA meetings whenever I wanted. So
Okay. Dr. Bob's Nightmare. We got a reading from that?
we do. So the reading that I selected was is from page 181 of the fourth edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And it says, I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. 1, sense of duty. 2, it is a pleasure. 3, because in doing so, I'm paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. 4, because every time I do it, I take out a little more insurance for myself against a possible slip. Which is interesting because I was just at an event this week where one of the main speakers or hosts did not want us to use the word slip any longer. So
Oh, he didn't, did he?
I
Yeah.
just may have to send him a photo of that line in the book.
You got to do that. He will appreciate that. But you're right, Dr. Bob, our co-founder, used the word slip, didn't he?
He sure did.
Yeah. I thought that was in it. I thought that was timely too when he was talking about that. There was a wet
There was,
puddle there on the floor, and he says, "I'm not just going to walk over there and slip on that wet
I was like,
spot."
you might though.
Oh my goodness. Well,
So
those are four
something
good reasons.
they sure are, and something that I've always appreciated about this story is I feel like similarly to Bill's story, that it just goes through, one of our founders' experience and how he found a relationship with a higher power, how he got sober. And our date of conception is his first day of permanent sobriety, which is June
Right.
10th.
June 10th,
Hmm.
which we've talked about before. He actually drank that day, right?
I
That
believe so.
that morning, he says that in his story that I think, yeah, he had a few drinks that night and one bottle of beer the next morning. That was June 10th, 1935, and that was my last drink. So if you use their math, June 10th was actually the last day he drank. That was his sobriety date. So that's my sobriety date. Not June the 10th, but the last day I drank, which is July the 2nd. Yeah.
Mine too. And
Yeah.
I was told by an old timer who said, "When was the last day you drank?" I said, "October 23rd." She said, "That is your sobriety date." I said, "Great.
Yep. Good enough for
Sounds
Dr.
great."
Bob. Yeah, it should work for us. Yeah. Dr. Bob was a bad drinker, though. You read his story. I mean, he was a serious alcoholic. And I like the fact that he had, when he was in the hospital, he would get his friends to smuggle liquor in to the
Hmm.
hospital so he could drink.
Well, and even
Uh,
thinking about people that I've helped over the years, like those are the people that I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like,
Yep.
are you joking? And so it's, very humbling experience to read this and be like, oh, well, one of our founders was doing the exact same thing. So I should probably give that person a break. But also, it's like this weird dichotomy in my brain because those are usually the people who are so bad off, they're so desperate when they do want to get sober
Hmm.
that they have a better chance.
Have a better chance. It seems like it. They're probably more willing. He even had the bootlegger would come by and leave liquor on his back porch.
It was just
He's a
awesome.
savage.
He sure was. He sure
He'd
was.
hide it in his boot. He'd hide it in his socks when he would go to the movies with his wife. Drink in the movie theater. I love it. See, there's no new stuff. People, I mean, he
We are
was
not
doing
that
it.
different.
No.
A fifth would fit perfectly in my boot, going into the football stadium.
Right. Oh man, that's funny. And then he tried a lot of ways to get back sober before he met Bill Wilson, mostly through spiritual stuff. He was, involved in the Oxford group, and he read and studied spiritual literature. He would go to their meetings, but he never stayed sober because he didn't know anything about alcoholism. It's always been interesting to me that he's a medical doctor and he understands all this spiritual stuff, but he didn't understand that he had alcoholism and the
Mm.
obsession to drink and the no defense against the first drink, and when he starts drinking he can't stop. It took an unemployed stockbroker to explain that to him.
Hmm.
And when he got the information from Bill about alcoholism being an illness, he was able to kind of put the spiritual tools and the knowledge of alcoholism together to stay sober. Interesting thing though that people need to know is that the co-founder relapsed,
Hmm.
right?
Well, I think it's interesting too in here that he talks about like having, I can't remember where it is, but he had like two really bad fears. One was of not being able to sleep, and the other was of running out of liquor.
Running out.
So like his solution to not sleeping was just drinking more, but then he was afraid he would run out, but he would pass out.
Yep.
Something to that
So,
effect. I was like, okay.
yep. I imagine he was a big pill head too.
Hmm.
He probably was prescribing himself stuff. And the story is that he was unwilling when Bill Wilson first made the approach to him. He was unwilling to go back and make amends or to tell people about his drinking, even though he found out later that everybody knew.
Hmm.
And that they claim that's really why he relapsed, was because he was unwilling to follow the program at that time, which was basically giving your life to God and admitting complete defeat, doing a confession, and then making restitution, and then trying to help other people. And then this has always been fascinating to me. That same day that he claims he took that last drink, on June the 10th, he went to work and actually performed a surgery that morning. I wonder who the patient was.
Yeah,
I
no
wonder if he
joke.
ever went making amends to that guy. And then that same day, he went out and made some amends,
Hmm.
and he's been sober ever since. Now we've got people, hey, you got to work a step a year, right? So you're 9 years sober before you make an amends. If you follow that logic,
Hmm.
there's lots of areas of the country where you know, you're a year sober before you do your fifth step.
Well, it's just very interesting. So, one of our former guests, Tracy, was in town recently and she stayed with me. So, we were talking about like how we got sober and this and that. And she said, well, in California, I did a step a month.
Right. That's popular.
And she said it wasn't a question. It wasn't, it just, that's how it was. You knew you were going to do step one when you first got sober for that month and step two and so on, so on.
Yeah. That's, yeah. I mean, I guess you can't argue. Some of those folks stay sober that way. Yeah. So I guess you can't argue with the results, but it's not really what the literature says. And it's certainly
No.
not Dr. Bob's experience, nor is it my personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about it is, if it worked for Dr. Bob 80 something years ago, it can work today.
Mm-hmm.
So he got better by taking actions,
Yeah.
and he immediately made amends. And the interesting thing about that is the thought, and I guess what we would call the kind of obsession to drink, did not leave him immediately. Doesn't he say like it was with him for 2.5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he stayed sober by continually taking action and trying to help people, not worrying so much about how he felt. It's an interesting question you asked earlier, though. Why isn't his story in the first part of the book? Do you know the answer? I
I
I
don't, but I
don't.
can tell you what I've heard.
All right.
Is he didn't want his story in the book at all because he is
Okay.
a humble king. Um, that it didn't need to be in the first 164.
Okay.
Not maybe he didn't want it in there at all. I don't know.
Well, I would buy that he didn't want it in there at all. He was trying to stay humble.
Mhm.
But then they put it in there anyway. So then, I mean, why isn't it right after Bill's story? Or why isn't, yeah, I don't know. I always think Dr. Bob got the short end of the stick on credit and acknowledgement, but
Hmm.
it's probably how he would want it.
Maybe.
You know, you got any questions for us?
Well, so one thing that I was thinking, anytime something is italicized in the book, that means it's important, right? And so it does at the beginning of Dr. Bob's Nightmare, just kind of like give a little blurb about him, that he was the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The birth of our society dates on his first day of permanent sobriety, June 10th, 1935. Um, he carried, to the year of his death, he carried the AA message to more than 5,000 alcoholic men and women. And to all these, he gave his medical services without thought of charge,
Hmm,
which is pretty incredible.
it is.
I mean, maybe that goes on today, but
It does not.
that is just incredible. And I said in this prodigy of service, he was well assisted by Sister Inacia at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, one of the greatest friends our fellowship will ever know.
Hmm,
And so I love how that is just kind of setting you up to read a story and saying like, hey, he helped so many people in AA and financially, really, with medical services. Um, here's, Sister Adacia who helped him so much. I'm pretty sure that that is a woman. I'm pretty
she's a
positive.
woman. Yeah.
Um, and it
Yeah.
just giving like this credit to people who really helped, like what they did and how they helped. And so the italicized part on page 180 says a far more important importance was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience. In other words, he talked my language.
Hmm,
And it's like he wasn't talking medical language,
right.
like Dr. Bob was a doctor. So I'm sure that he knew plenty about the body and the brain and whatever, or enough.
Yep.
Um, but like that could not get or keep him sober.
Yep. Yeah. So it is interesting. So Bill Wilson brought the idea of just being hopeless and being completely defeated, and talked about the hopelessness of alcoholism as it relates to drinking alcohol,
Right.
right? And so I guess in AA we call that identification,
Hmm.
and it's very important. I mean, you could even say if there's no identification, there's no recovery.
Hmm.
And So it's very important for us when we're talking to a new person to focus on alcoholism.
Yeah,
Yeah, not yeah. What was the shrapnel? Not alcoholism. That's a
that's
joke.
right. Yep.
Yeah, but we should talk about our own experience of drinking and what drinking did to us, for us, and the effect that it had on us, and our inability to stop. And that's what people will identify with. And you know, we don't talk about the bills and shooting heroin and smoking meth or crack or that. I mean, all that. People maybe do all that stuff, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, we actually have a singleness of purpose for a reason. We have a primary purpose for a reason, and that stuff is not outdated and not old. And there is no new type of alcoholic. You'll hear all kinds of stuff in meetings nowadays, and things are different. Well, they're not different. So, and you know what? The book at that thing we were at this weekend, that one guy talking, he made the comment that I'd never heard this before. That in the chapter working with others, he kind of implied that Dr. Bob was, even though Bill wrote it, Dr. Bob was actually the one that was doing all that stuff,
Hmm.
and people kind of associated with Dr. Bob. And I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And there's heavy emphasis in there on identification and talking about the hopelessness of the condition, which is what Bill did to Bob. So if it worked then, it'll work now.
So he said that his reasons, he said, I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want it, need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons, which that was our reading today. So what are your reasons for passing on what you learned to others?
That's a good question. I do, I could say the same four things he said, other than number two, I don't completely feel like all the time. I'll just be honest about it. I
It
don't know
is a
what,
pleasure.
it's not, it does not feel like it's a pleasure all the time to help alcoholics, just to be completely honest. But I do think it's a sense of responsibility, right? When I was in a detox, a guy from AA came in and talked to me, and he actually used the term that he hoped I would pass it on when I got better. And so, that is one reason that I do it, is it is a sense of duty, or it's a sense of responsibility. I'm always constantly reminded of where I came from. They always say, remember where you came from. Well, if we believe the alcoholic mind, then sometimes you may not be able to remember where you came from. So that's why it's important to work with new people, because it's a constant reminder of where I came from.
Don't you
And
have a
then,
famous quote in relation to that?
oh, if you never leave the basics, you don't have to go back to the basics.
There you
So,
go.
right, there's a book called Back to Basics. It's a fine book. I've studied it and done some of that stuff, but the big book is just as good. But yeah, if you never leave the basics, you don't have to go back to the basics. Yeah. And then the
Thank
other
you.
thing I do when I work with new people, or I'm talking to other alcoholics, I ask myself, do I really believe this? Am I doing this? So it's kind of like it is built-in insurance that, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm practicing what I'm preaching and what I'm telling people. So, that's kind of why I do it, and it certainly has worked for me.
Something interesting right after that, which you referenced, is um, Dr. Bob states, like, unlike most of our crowd, I did not get over my craving for liquor much during the first 2.5 years of abstinence. It was almost always with me, but at no time have I been anywhere near yielding.
Yep.
So, even though he had that craving, it sounds like he wasn't going and buying liquor or, you know, walking up and down the aisles of Harris Teeter or whatever you want to say. Like, it sounds like it was kind of there, and he was pushing himself more into helping others, helping them with their medical care,
Yep.
you know?
Well, if he helped 5,000 people, he stayed so damn busy he couldn't. I
That's
mean,
right.
that's part of, I know that's not a complete solution, but that's really part of it, is that if you stay very active in other people's lives, it keeps you out of yourself.
Hmm.
And it'll keep that mind from really messing with you and forcing you to do something that you don't want to do. So, I mean, that's why it's important to keep working with other people. Yep.
And my other question was, why is it important for alcoholics to help one another based on experience?
Well, because our experience is the only thing we have. And experience, if you focus on your own experience, it's just based in truth and it's based in fact. And it's not drama and emotion and speculation. And so alcoholics, all humans need the truth. So, if I'm helping somebody strictly based on my experience, I'm hitting them with truth and with things that can't be disputed. You can't argue somebody else's experience. And so that for a new person, the truth, it's very different than a medical person or a psychological person or a family member, pleading with them to get sober or prodding them to get sober or doing an interrogation or a intervention. Hey, this is exactly what happened to me, and it's hard to argue with that. So I mean, I think that's why it's important to do that.
So Dr. Bob says in his story here, if you think you are an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting what is in this book, I feel sorry for you.
I love
Which
it.
I just think is an incredible sentence, period. Um, and it says, if you think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that is your affair. But if you are really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and all and sincerely feel that you must have some help, we know that we have an answer for you. It never fails if you go about it with one half the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when you were getting another drink.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, like I don't know that um anyone around me thought that I had a drinking problem. I mean, my boss was certainly shocked. It was a husband and wife, and they were certainly shocked when I said, "Hey, I'm having problems with alcohol. I was in jail last night. Like I'm gonna need some time off work." All these different things. They were very surprised, but they did see a difference in me when I came back to work. They're like, "You're an even better employee than before. This is awesome."
You know what?
So,
Yeah. What I love about what you just read is his confidence in what he's saying.
mhm,
That he's like, hey, no, if you got a drinking problem, and even if you're atheist, agnostic, and an intellectual, which we know are stumbling blocks to recovery,
mhm,
he basically says, hey, I feel sorry for you, but if you really want an answer, I've got one.
yeah,
We've got one. He's not saying maybe or kind of.
mhm,
I know this can work for you. And that's kind of what happened to me with the people that I got sober with. They instilled confidence in me. They weren't trying to build me down or putting fear in me. It was
yep,
like, no, hey, listen, if you do this, you're going to be able to get better.
mhm.
And
Well, what I
I,
love about it too, if you think you can beat this game alone, that
yep,
is your affair.
yep, yeah,
And, I think in Alcoholics Anonymous, at least, I go into facilities and help newcomers and people that have been sober for a while, whatever. Sometimes people just don't know what Alcoholics Anonymous is right now or what it is not.
yep,
And I have found that when someone is introducing themselves as a dual diagnosed something, 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 if I just go to that person after the meeting and say, hey, this is AA, we don't have any opinion on any of that. If you're an alcoholic, say so. If you don't know, say your first name.
yep,
Like we're here to share our experience with you, and you get to determine if you're an alcoholic. I don't care about all these other diagnoses other people have given you.
yep,
And so I think there's something very powerful in that in AA, it's like you make the determination. I don't have to do
yep,
anything except share my experience with you.
yep. Yeah, I don't have any evidence to this. Maybe there is some in the literature, but I've always thought that Bob was way more like what working with others says. Hey, if you want it, I can help you. If you don't, that's okay. Go on. I don't think he pushed or prodded or tried to convince people that they were alcoholic. It was like, hey, you got to figure it out for yourself. I can't
Yeah.
help you. this is a great story. It's a great example. I've often thought we study Bill's story all the time,
Yep.
but we don't study this one. I think because people, it's too simple.
Yep.
They're like, there's got to be more to it,
Uh-huh.
but there's really not. It's a very simple, easy example of how to stay sober and how to live a great life. You want to move on to
So
meeting shrapnel, Shank?
the only shrapnel that I have for you today, that I really need some clarification on
Okay.
is I'm a friend of Bill. Are you a friend of Bill's? Are you a friend of Bill W?
Well, now, there's many forms of this.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a friend of Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Or
you a
like,
friend
you
of
know,
Bill? Or there's
the first time that I heard this, and maybe not the first time I remember hearing this was someone was telling their story, and they were telling about being in the airport, blah blah blah, and like seeing someone else and just knowing, I don't remember why, and going up to them and saying, "Are you a friend of Bill's? Are you a friend of Bill's?" And I was just like, I will never in my life freaking do that. I will never do that.
No.
It's weird. I hate it. It's so odd. And I have never done that. However, I was in an airport with a group of AA members. We were heading up to the Bill Wilson house, and we're in the airport, and we had like a little meeting, you know, because we had a long layover. And there were some people that came up that were like, "Are you a friend of Bill's?" Just like,
Oh,
"Get me
yeah.
out of here." I hate it. I hate this so much.
It is awful. It is awful. But I've even been like, at an airport or somewhere else. Where was I? In like a hotel somewhere. And they would like announce it. There's a friend of Bill's meeting at such and such. I'm like, oh my God. It's so dumb. Like your example, if you bump into somebody and they say, "Hey, are you a friend of Bill?" Or why don't they just say, "Hey, are you a member of Alcoholics Anonymous?" There's
I
nothing
know.
wrong with that. This is where anonymity like gets skewed and like twisted. That's not an anonymity break to ask somebody if they're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right.
Man,
And
it's
if
crazy.
they say no, oh, so what?
Exactly. Yeah. Are you a friend of Bill's? I know it's kind of part
It's
of the
one of those things. Fine.
part of the culture now.
Well,
But
we're
you'll
counterculture over here. So the reason that I wanted to bring this up to you is because, I think we should start saying, "Are you a friend of Bob's?"
100%. So we're scrapping. Are we scrapping? Are you a friend of Bill?
I feel like we should scrap it.
All right, let's scrap it.
Okay, and we should just say, "Are you a friend of
So are you a friend of Bill's? Is out
Dr.
of here.
Bob?"
So all right. So
I think
here's
it should
the
be out of
question.
here, right? Come on.
Yeah, I think it should be. So I'm going to officially scrap. Are you a friend of Bill's? Shank, what are you going to do?
It's out of here. It's scrapped. Super scrap.
Super scrap. So we got to replace it with a friend of Bob.
Friend of Bob.
All right. So if you're out there listening, now listen. So we have, well, a friend of Bob is a little more, I think it's a little more sophisticated.
Definitely.
Right. Dr. Bob, I think, set a way better example of how to live than Bill. Now, I appreciate Bill and some of the stuff he did.
It takes all kinds.
I have taken LSD, and I did it I was on a spiritual quest. I was not sober when I did it, by the way. I was before I got sober. And I've done some other things that Bill's done, but Dr. Bob set a very good example. So I think I'm a friend of Bob. It's just better. I think Bob got the short end of the stick on it. Why did all of a sudden it became a friend of Bill? Why not I'm a friend of Bill and Bob, or I'm a friend of Bob?
There you go. Why not?
Yes.
So we're starting it now. You heard it here first.
Yes. So start using I'm a friend of Bob. Now, we kind of preempted some of this on our IG page.
Mm-hmm.
So we did put out some memes with some T-shirts, a friend of Bob, and a bumper sticker, friend of Bob. We've actually had people wanting to order those items. We don't have those items. That was just to see if there was any appetite out there for it.
Mm-hmm.
But so it appears that there is a small movement started in the fellowship because of those memes of being a friend of Bob. Now we do have a little battle going on with one of our guests, Mrs. Jones.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a friend of Bill, and she's been sniper sharing some of our memes about that. I guess would be a good way to put it, and we appreciate that. There, Wiz kitten.
Wiz. We see your
good.
snipes.
Yep, but keep it coming. We're gonna continue to support Bob. So be on the lookout for more info on a friend of Bob.
There you go.
So the next time you're out somewhere and you're wondering about somebody, ask them, "Hey, are you a friend of Bob?"
Love it.
All right. Hey, we appreciate everyone that listens. If you got any suggestions or comments, you can hit us up at freedom@alcoholicsalive.com. You can always like or share our episodes. Be on the lookout for all new and refreshed episodes actually next week on season 8. You don't want to miss it. In the meantime, be free.
Freedom.
One is the simplicity of our program. Let's not louse it all up with Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind but have very little to do with our actual AA work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service.
Thanks for listening. If you have a comment, suggestion, or just need help, you can email Shank and Wayne at freedom@alcoholicsalive.com. Remember, we're recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous, but we do not speak for Alcoholics Anonymous, nor do we get paid. Join us next week for another great episode.